The intense heat wave sweeping across the Middle East this summer is taking a high toll on people. Temperatures have soared to unprecedented levels, causing widespread discomfort and significant challenges in many countries that might even be unequipped to face the impacts of climate change. This year's Hajj season, which took place in mid-June, has been particularly challenging. With temperatures soaring sometimes to almost 52 degrees Celsius in Mecca, the intense heat has had severe repercussions for the pilgrims. The extreme conditions have led to over 1,300 deaths, and the count is still being updated for many nationalities. As someone who has performed the Hajj before, I can attest to the physical and emotional demands of this pilgrimage, which are only exacerbated by the extreme weather conditions. The journey involves several days of rituals, much of which takes place outdoors and requires a significant amount of walking and physical exertion. I remember the day of Arafah in 2019. It was 48 degrees Celsius and I had experienced a heat stroke from standing hours under the blistering sun, and remember saying the Shahada, the final sentence a Muslim says before their death. And this was coming from a young 20-something healthy person. Many Arab countries are experiencing extreme heat this year. In Egypt, daily life has become uncomfortable and has also strained the country's power grid, leading to occasional blackouts. In Lebanon, many people are struggling to cope with limited access to electricity and cooling. And in Iraq, the government has taken an unprecedented step of cutting working hours to help citizens deal with extreme temperatures. This is Beyond the Headlines, and I'm your host Ismail Na'ar. And in this episode, we're looking closely at how life in some Arab countries was affected because of the heat crisis, and how people struggle as they try to stay cool and safe during the summer. The Hajj pilgrimage this year has faced unprecedented challenges due to the extreme heat, leading to significant loss of life, especially among unauthorized pilgrims, including many Egyptians. They had to endure extreme heat without proper shelter or comfort, and lacked access to essential amenities and healthcare, contributing to the high mortality rate. The tragedy went on as the Saudi authorities faced challenges identifying bodies due to many pilgrims using tourist visas. We listened from an Egyptian pilgrim who talked about her Hajj experience this year.
This year was the first time for me to perform Hajj. I went with my sister, her friend. We were a big group. We went with a travel agency. And we already knew in advance that the weather was going to be extremely hot. And although it was inevitable, it was inescapable, we tried as much as possible to make things easier for us when we were preparing for our pilgrimage. So, for example, we brought cotton clothes, we brought umbrellas, mosquito repellents. And I think one thing that helped was that the travel agency organized our departure times, the trip itself, at times where, for example, during the evening, when it was possible to move during the evening, there were also these water sprinklers everywhere. They were lining the street from where we were staying to the mountain. So, and they were all on. Also, there were many trucks, and I think these belong to the Saudi government. There were many trucks that were handing out water for free. Also, the police officers, the security officers were spraying people with water all the time. But again, I wouldn't say there was a lot of shade, for example. I mean, the streets were just... There were no trees on the streets, for example, or overhead shields, for example, like shielding us from the heat. But again, there was this very good supply of water. I would say that the second or third day of Hajj, that this was the hottest day I recall. The weather was a bit suffocating, I would say. But however, the next day when we were going back to throw the pebbles, this day was unusually hot, that we received warnings on our phones from the travel agency, from one of our guides, saying that because of the extreme heat, the Saudi government advised people against moving during this time. I think it was sometime between noon and Asr. We had our umbrellas. This day it was impossible to move without umbrellas. And this day, I remember, because we walked longer than usual, we actually saw a lot of ambulance cars and a couple of people, a few, I wouldn't say a lot, They were lying on the sides of the streets. They seemed either unconscious, extremely dehydrated. This is what we heard from other people who were gathering around us.
Looking at the Arab region as a whole, many countries are struggling more than usual this summer. Egypt is experiencing an intense heat wave with temperatures reaching up to 48 degrees Celsius in Aswan and between 43 and 45 degrees Celsius in most of the country. The heat this year coincides with power cuts, which according to many people often extend beyond the announced hours. The loss of trees due to urbanization has exacerbated the situation, reducing the shade and increasing temperatures in urban areas. The National's correspondent Kamal Tabiqa tells us more.
Since the end of April, temperatures in Cairo have risen dramatically. The summer months in Egypt usually start in May, June, and the populace is used to dealing with temperatures that are around 35, mid-30s, sometimes late 30s, and when it breaks 40, it's usually news. But this year there have been repeated heat waves with the temperature breaking 43, 45. I saw 48 degrees Celsius recorded on one day. It's all anyone is talking about. And the government, in order to lighten the load on the national power grid, because when it's hot, people tend to want to cool down by using electrically powered fans, air conditioners. So it puts extra strain on the grid, the power grid for the government. So to fight this, last year the government announced periodic power cuts, which would happen every day for 2 hours. People have been very upset about the power cuts, especially that the government had been boasting about exporting energy and exporting electricity, and that we export natural gas. And so people had expected that that would benefit the country and the power grid first. However, it hasn't. Starting this week, the Egyptian government announced that the power cuts, which happen daily for 2 hours, would now be happening for 3 hours until the end of the week because of supply issues with natural gas from Israel and because of the unprecedented temperatures being recorded throughout these heat waves. The mood in Cairo right now is upset. People are not taking the heat well. It's affecting their lives in a lot of ways. It's, for people who have to work out in the sun, a lot of Egyptians are manual laborers. A lot of Egyptians have to be out in the city. It's a very congested city. And so people are finding it unbearable. It's all people are talking about on social media. They're blaming the government for not providing enough fuel to keep power going so that people can cool down. Summer in Cairo this year has been described by several people I spoke to as absolutely unbearable. Temperatures have consistently remained slightly under 40 sometimes, but Egyptians aren't used to dealing with these conditions. Egyptians are dealing with the power cuts in various different ways. Some people I spoke to said they are simply cutting work. They just simply can't deal with leaving the house during the day when temperatures are breaking 43, 45. Others have told me that they simply cannot handle speaking to anyone or dealing with high-pressure tasks on the job during the day, which affects their productivity and their work and their morale. For students, many of whom are preparing for the end-of-year exams at the moment, the power outages have become an issue because of studying. A lot of them need lighting indoors to study. So something that's been popping up is churches, community centers, mosques are now, which they run on generators so that they can stay operational throughout the whole day. They have been offering their common spaces for students to come and study and prepare for their exams as a means of helping the government deal with this crisis. With regards to who is most affected by the power outages at the moment, I would say small businesses are being hit especially hard because for large malls and commercial stores, they have enough funds to buy generators to ensure that they have power supply throughout the power cut period, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. However, small businesses don't, and so they have to deal with reduced revenues because of no power.
Iraq is enduring a severe heat wave as well, with temperatures around 50 degrees Celsius. This has prompted the government to cut public sector working hours. These measures were aimed at alleviating the burden on citizens and manage electricity consumption. The Ministry of Health has issued guidelines for coping with the extreme heat, including staying hydrated and avoiding direct sunlight. The National's correspondent in Baghdad, Sinan Mahmoud, provided us with more details.
In Iraq, summer often means enduring temperatures that soar near and sometimes above 50 degrees Celsius in different parts of the country. Yet, for many Iraqis, the oppressive heat is compounded by another and more enduring struggle, which is the chronic electricity outages. The electricity crisis in Iraq is a complex and deeply rooted problem that impacts every aspect of daily life, especially during the harsh summer months. It is considered one of the pressing issues facing Iraqis across the country. The problem, which dates back to the early 1990s, continues to disrupt daily life despite numerous governmental efforts to provide a stable power supply. The Gulf War, in which a US-led coalition drove Saddam Hussein's army out of Kuwait, inflicted severe damage on the country's infrastructure. Subsequent conflicts, coupled with decades of mismanagement, corruption, unstable security situation, and political wrangling, have only worsened the situation. While various governments have made attempts to stabilize the power grid, these efforts have largely fallen short, leaving the grid unreliable and the frequent outages a part of daily life. In late 2022, former Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi made a shocking statement saying that Iraq spent at least $60 billion on the electricity sector since 2003 US-led invasion that toppled Saddam Hussein. Aside from money lost to corruption, much has been misallocated. The Ministry of Electricity says it has added 30,000 megawatts this year, bringing the total production to slightly over 27,000 megawatts. That's still far from the 48,000 megawatts needed during summer, according to the ministry. During heat waves, the demand for electricity surges as people power fans and air conditioning units to stay cool. This increased demand often leads to longer and more frequent power cuts across the country, affecting all aspects of life. Homes, businesses, schools, and hospitals are all impacted, with many Iraqis resorting to using private generators to fill the gap. However, these generators are expensive for many Iraqis, noisy, and contribute to air pollution. The government has recently undertaken several initiatives to address the electricity shortage in addition to building new power plants. It has been focusing on renewable energy projects, signing several major deals with international companies to construct solar power plants. It is also encouraging people to set up solar panels in their houses by offering them soft loans. As temperatures started to increase, the Iraqi government last month decided to cut public sector working hours by 60 minutes during summer, starting early at 7 a.m. and ending at 1 p.m. The government also allowed the governors to announce public holidays in the provinces where temperatures hit 50 degrees Celsius. The Ministry of Health has also been issuing continuous guidance to help Iraqis cope with the high heat, stressing the need for hydration and caution. Street vendors for ice cream, cold drinks, and watermelon are dotted on Baghdad streets and other intersections. Some shopkeepers have also set up showers on the pavement for those who want to cool down, and some people are also seen diving into the rivers during the day.
The situation in Lebanon is equally dire. The Lebanese people were already grappling with economic instability and frequent power outages, but now they are facing the added burden of a severe heat wave. The National's correspondent in Beirut, Nada Atallah, reports.
In Lebanon, heat waves have been associated in recent years with an increased risk of massive wildfires. Everyone still remembers the large forest fires of 2019, when nearly 200 wildfires broke out across the country as temperatures hovered around 40 degrees. Today, the risk of massive wildfires is higher than ever, as southern Lebanon has been under constant bombardment for almost 9 months amid the cross-border conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. The Israeli use of white phosphorus, a highly toxic and incendiary chemical that can cause massive fires, has already destroyed large areas of farmland and forests in South Lebanon. Some 812 fires in the southern region were sparked because of white phosphorus since the war started, according to the Lebanese Ministry of Agriculture. Hundreds of hectares of land has been torched due to the Israeli shelling. The Financial Times reported last week that along the Lebanon-Israeli border, there is effectively now a 5-kilometer dead zone, with land scorched and unlivable. In recent weeks, drought and rising temperatures have dramatically increased the risk of fires. The National visited a fire station in southern Lebanon, where ill-equipped firefighters are bracing for the worst. Anis Abla, who heads the civil defense in South Lebanon Marjayun area, told us that the fire season had started much earlier than last year. This month alone, they have had 21 incidents compared to around 4 per month before the war at the same time. Incendiary weapons and heat waves are a deadly cocktail. Mr. Abla explained that fires caused by shelling spread quickly because of the drought. Once ignited, these fires are very difficult to control, he said, because rescue teams have a hard time reaching the location due to the constant shelling and GPS jamming caused by the Israelis.
هلا صار في مسبب فتنا على مناطق خطرة جدار الصوت. شفتي ليش بينزلوا هودي الصور؟ لا هلا منيح. قلت لك there's another one. هو ليش خفت؟
The teams are also ill-equipped to take on the blazes. Lebanon, now in the 5th year of its economic crisis, cannot afford maintenance, let alone new equipment for its firefighters. Mr. Abla told us that their truck is almost 30 years old and that it belongs either to a museum or in the bin. When confronted with white phosphorus fires, they resort to using COVID masks against toxic fumes. As we speak, our conversation is interrupted by the sound of bombing. The room shakes. Mr. Abla barely flinches, jokes and said that he no longer bothers hanging picture frames on the wall. The main challenge we face, he says, is working under the eye of an enemy that is not afraid to kill civilians and rescue workers.
To understand the reason behind this extreme hot weather many Arabs are facing, we hear from Mustafa Bayoumi, UAE-based research fellow for sustainability and climate change at the Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Academy.
The primary driver of climate change is the increase in global greenhouse gas emissions. Those result from human activities such as energy generation, transportation, agriculture, among others. And climate change leads to an increase in size and frequency of extreme weather events. There are a few regions that might be more vulnerable to extreme weather events. So those are particularly the coastal regions, and that is due to sea level rise and storm surges. Urban areas as well are vulnerable towards climate change, particularly extreme heat, floods, and droughts. Extreme weather events can damage infrastructure such as roads, bridges. They could interrupt energy generation, could damage residential properties, and could impact agricultural yields, for example. And of course, they could result in loss of houses or other assets, and it could reduce income for particularly for those working on a daily wage due to the interruption of transportation or closure of manufacturing plants. And of course, it could impact agricultural yields. So that's particularly for farmers. It could stop fishermen from actually going out on the sea. And so it definitely could impact livelihoods.
That's it for today. For more about the story, head to thenationalnews.com. This episode was produced by Dua Farid and Arthur Edison, and I've been your host, Ismail Na'ar. Please remember to subscribe to get all the episodes of Beyond the Headlines as soon as they come out.